great day just to be milling around. Actually, in the most historic sense of the word, this is the wrong time of the year to be milling around. But you know what? We'll talk about that in just a little bit. My name is William, and I'm the lead interpreter out here for St. Charles County Parks at the Historic Daniel Boone Home. And today, I would like to show off one of my favorite buildings here on the site, the magnificent Borgmann Mill. Let me go downstairs and I'll meet you in just a moment. Welcome, friends, to the magnificent Borgmann Mill. This is one of my favorite buildings out of all the historic structures that we have on our site. This was a grist mill. And if you don't know what a grist mill is, let me ask you this. Do you like biscuits? Do you like cornbread? In general, if you like those two things as well as liking to eat, you would have appreciated having a grist mill in your area if you were living 150, 160 years ago. So what a grist mill does is it's an apparatus where you take corn and you take grain and you grind them down. And the end result, flour, cornmeal, all these things that we need, which makes biscuits and cornbread possible. So, this is a remarkable mill, and we'll be talking a little bit about how it is all put together in just a few minutes. But every building that we have out here has a story. And so I want to tell you just a little bit about the story of this mill. And that story starts with Frederick Wilhelm Borgmann, who was a German immigrant, came over here in the 1840s, settled about 8 miles away from where we're at right now. He built this mill, we believe, between 1847 and 1851. Now, if you remember just a few minutes ago, I was telling you that it's really the wrong time of year to be milling around. Well, here's what I meant by that. It's springtime. And the way that a grist mill worked is that it had to grind up wheat and corn, which means that it could only do that after the harvest. So when we think of the word milling around, that's something that would have happened in the autumn, in the fall. So you can imagine, because this was only a seasonal enterprise, that just being a miller was not something that could provide a singular income for a family. And this brings us back to this greater truth that we find with a lot of the pioneer families, is that you had to be good at a lot of different things and able to make it. So, when it comes to Mr. Borgmann, we know that he was well known in these areas for his prowess as a woodworker. We know that, among other things, that he made wooden shoes, all the way from little baby shoes up to full adult shoes. Now, the history nerd in me gets really excited about that, thinking about they were still making wooden shoes in Missouri as late as the 1840s and the 1850s. We also know that he was renowned for his work of spoon making, also that he built carpet looms, furniture. In other words, Mr. Borgmann was pretty widely experienced, and his woodworking skills that he would have been able to offer to the people around him would have helped to sustain him. He had to be good at a lot of things, and this mill is just one more of the things that Mr. Borgmann was just absolutely extraordinary at. So, let's take a look at how this mill works. One of the most amazing aspects of this mill is in the way in which that it operates. Typically, when we think of grist mills, what we think of is we think that they're usually located along the side of a river or a stream, anywhere that's got flowing water. And that flowing water would then turn a water wheel, And then that water wheel has all sorts of gears that connect to the machinery that grinds everything up. Well, that's all fine and good unless you don't have a stream. And what do you do if you don't have a stream? You do exactly what Mr. Boardman did, which was design a mill that would be animal powered. So, if you notice these 4 posts that are all extending out from the shaft, this is where the animals would be hitched. Now, could have been horses, could have been mules, could have been oxen. Basically anything that had 4 legs and was heavy could probably do the job for you. So the animals would go in a clockwise motion and they would turn this large gear that you see up here. So this large gear is just one of 3 gears. Each one gets a little smaller and a little smaller until it finally leads to the stone that does all of the grinding. We're up here on the 2nd floor of the mill. And this is really where everything happened when we talk about the transformation from wheat or corn into flour or cornmeal. So you would have the raw product hoisted up and brought in through the windows on the 2nd floor, and it would be dragged over here to where the millstones are at. Now you notice that this millstone has the hole in the middle, and that's where all of your wheat or your corn is going to be poured into that. Now you have the machinery working down below and the stone is grinding. Now you have 2 stones actually. The bottom stone right there, it doesn't do anything. It's always stationary. And it has grooves cut in it, one direction. Now your top stone, this is the one that's connected to the axle. So remember, you go to big to medium to small. And by the time that big one is going around slowly, then it connects us with the medium one and it gets a little quicker. And then it gets to the smallest one and it's going pretty quick after all. So this is where all of your grinding is going on. So it grinds it all down and it forces the product out of the side. And then that would go into a chute and would be collected in a bag from there. So that's pretty amazing just in how mechanically how it all works. But there's one more thing that's really just incredible. You see this handle right here. This handle is connected to the gear down below, which means that I can turn this handle and I can raise or lower that top stone. Now that is a big deal because not everything gets ground to the same consistency. So we have the opportunity to go ahead and adjust this as we need depending on what the grinding operations required at that time. Friends, thank you for exploring with me today Mr. Boardman's masterpiece. This may be the last walking wheel mill in existence in the Midwest, possibly the United States. It is in a wonderful state of preservation, and the reason for that is competition. The mill probably only operated for less than 10 years before a competing mill put it out of business. So we're very thankful that we have such a mill in such a wonderful state of preservation. I love coming out here. And when I come upstairs here, I can't help but notice and admire the rafters that have the bark on them, the hand-hewn support beams, and then I look down at all of the intricate millwork. Each one of these hundreds of cogs, all done by hand. Each one having to fit their place just to make it all work. It really humbles me to think about how much ingenuity and resourcefulness that existed among the pioneers. How profitable was it? Well, typically the miller would get a certain percentage of the total yield. Now that might be 10%, that might be 15%, maybe even 20%. So if a mill is serving several farm families, that could be quite a tidy profit at the end of the season. So the miller would then have the option of either keeping all of that flour and cornmeal, trading it away, or selling it for profit. Now, if the miller is the only one in the area serving all of these families, they're going to have to wait their turn. And in fact, the phrase milling around comes directly from that. So you show up, you have your wheat and your corn to grind, and you just have to wait your turn. There are other farmers there. Almost certainly they're talking about crops, they're talking about livestock. They might even be telling whoppers, but they may not be being very productive. So another word for just loafing became milling around. That's what they were doing, simply milling around. So I want to thank you for visiting the mill with me today, and I want to thank you for allowing me to introduce you to my good friend, Frederick Wilhelm Borgmann. Now, of course, Mr. Borgmann passed away decades ago, and now he sleeps quietly in the cemetery overlooking the beautiful village of Femme Osage. But his life and his legacy live on in this marriage of ingenuity and enterprise that was his grist mill. So on behalf of St. Charles County Parks and the Historic Daniel Boone Home, thank you for watching.